Welcome to the Jeremiah Show.
Thank you for having me.
That's the voice of chef restaurateur David Skinner. David, sit back and just relax and enjoy some of these phrases that I'm going to sing about you, or others have
Don't make
said
me
about
blush.
you. I mean, yeah, we're going to make you blush a little bit. It's nice to be complimented, and you deserve it so much. So let's get started here. Like I said, welcome everybody
Thank
to
you.
the
Thank
Jeremiah
you.
Show, and welcome David. Really incredible guest. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him right now. I'm excited because I don't think we've ever done a show like this. And hang out with us for the next hour, get to know David and his restaurants and his incredible story, his life story. And I think you're going to see why this is really a special show. And Eaters Best Restaurant list of 2024. It begins its description of David Skinner's newest restaurant masterpiece, ISHTIA, this way. A true destination restaurant devoted to indigenous American cooking, smack on the Texas Gulf Coast. The Eater review begins. Dining out should be a lot of things: nourishing, thought provoking, and less than a week's rent. But one that can be easy to forget about is fun. Over the last several years, dining out has been more than occasionally somewhat unfun. Delicious, sure, and inspiring and important, but not necessarily an effortless good time. And honestly, who's surprised? Social reckoning, politics, and pandemics and recessions have intersected with restaurants in a way that had to happen, which has made the act of eating and going out feel even more consequential. And that's a good thing. But as we explore the crop of stellar new restaurants that opened between September 2023 and September 2024, we found ourselves, if fleetingly, forgetting about the real world outside the dining room and settling into meals that felt exciting, confident, and joyful. This year's list of the country's best new restaurants is a result of a collection of restaurant folk, including chefs, hosts, line cooks, and servers who are doing exactly what they want to be doing because, hell, it's now or never. That was the essential spirit of eating this year. And the 14 sensational newcomers on this list are the perfect places to revel in it. We know that eventually we'll have to throw on our coats and brace for the outside world, but nothing bolsters the soul for reality quite like a warm, fun, satisfying meal. And that's a beginning of the Eater review and list of top 14 restaurants by Leslie Sutter, Special Projects Director. So in November 2024, ISHTIA was named Best New Restaurant in Texas by Eater.com and listed as one of the top 14 restaurants in the USA. But this just came in. I've always wanted to do this. Breaking news.
Breaking news.
Breaking news. I've never done that before on the show. It's just in, honestly, within the last 10 minutes. Eaters has named ISHTIA the best new restaurant in America for the year. Congratulations for that, David. I'm almost finished. You have so many accolades and uh, reviews that are so positive that I've just got to read a couple more. Tom
Okay.
Sietsema of the Washington Post says of David, a chef with a flair for the avant-garde serves up 3 hours of sorcery. How would you like that review?
That
I
was a
like
good quote. I
I
love that.
like that. It's a
Yeah.
good quote. Scott Vogel of Houstonia magazine says one of the best restaurants in the world is in Kima, and nobody has heard of it. I don't think that's true anymore, David. A
No.
mad genius Mad genius. Wow. Named David Skinner is serving up the culinary experience of a lifetime. And June Naylor of AAA Texas Journey Magazine says of Chef David Skinner, David's hands are prepared like few others, and they're accompanied by a daring imagination. Yes, he is all of these things. But wait, there's more. He's a chef, as we've established, a restaurateur. He's also a winemaker, a distiller. He's an inventor, a gastro-judge, and a Choctaw native. Welcome, David, aka the Willy Wonka of food.
Thank you, Jeremiah. It's
You
great
got
to
so
be
many
here.
titles.
Yeah, try getting a business card.
Yeah, where are you? How are you going to put all those on there? I would just say I might be the first to congratulate you. Am I the first to
Yeah,
congratulate
I
you here
think
on the
you
Grandma
are. Yeah, yeah, because
for the
it came
best?
in right before we started on this. So
So you got tell us what happened. You got an email from the editor at Eaters,
yeah, exactly. It's
and they
like
said,
congratulations, and I'm like, oh wow, thank you. Now I got to get on a podcast.
"Yeah, now I got to get the word out." I
Yeah,
mean, how amazing! That must just be the coolest um, thing to hear that you've got the best. You've been voted the best restaurant in America.
it's nice. It's very
That's
nice.
very nice. You're very humble.
Yeah,
All right, let's talk about early days because you have such a great life. I know we're going to have to leave some of it out, but I don't want to leave any of it out. And let's hit some of the milestones.
sure.
First, tell me about Grandma Mimi.
Yeah, so my grandmother was a pastry chef, and I started, you know, hanging around the kitchen. I won't say cooking, but hanging around the kitchen when I was like 3 or 4 years old. And and for my fourth birthday, I asked her for a carousel cake. Um, and she was kind of like, "You want what?" And I'm like, "I want a cake that looks like a carousel." And and she was like, "Okay, all right, let me see what I can do." She you don't expect it to move, do you? And I was like, "Well, that'd be nice, but no, I'm not expecting that." So anyway,
Like
she
a carousel, like the ponies, that kind of
exactly the
that go around.
ponies going
Oh, I thought
around
maybe
and
it
all that.
was a type of cake, but no, you
No,
actually
no,
want a
no,
carousel.
an actual carousel. Yeah, and so she
Anybody
made
can do it. Grandma Mimi can do it.
exactly, exactly. I've got it, a picture of it with me at my birthday party up on the website. But I think that was probably the start of not just a love for food, but a love for what you could do with food. You
Yeah.
know, um,
Well, anything your imagination.
what whatever you can
Uh,
imagine. Yeah, and I've been named the Willy Wonka of food. Which I kind of proudly take that moniker because growing up Willy Wonka was like my favorite movie ever.
yeah.
Willy Wonka, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, I mean those were the
Golden
ones that
ticket.
like yeah, it was like I mean they were super imaginative, lots of fun, and had
What did
food.
you love about the kitchen when you were hanging out with your grandma? What was it? What drew you? Was it just that she was there? Was it the food, the smells, the heat? What,
It
like,
was like all of it,
what do you
all of it.
remember that
Yeah,
do you
all of it.
remember the
And
excitement?
it was, yeah, there was always activity. I guess maybe that's the way to put it. There was always activity, and yeah, the food was great. She tried to turn me into a pastry chef, and I failed miserably. I am.
I was gonna say, well, many have before you as well. That's a hard career. What was her influence on? I was gonna ask, is that, in your development as a chef, what at that time, what were some of the things that she taught you and that she wanted to teach you about in the
Well,
kitchen?
she taught me a lot about baking, and that was interesting because when they say there's an art and science to cooking, art is the savory side, and science is by far the baking and pastry side. It's not. baking is really pure science. If you don't follow the recipe, it's not going to turn out.
Mhm.
Um, you don't just add a pinch of this and a pinch of that and see what happens. It's like, you know, I remember the Ratatouille movie, it's like follow the recipe. I mean, that's
That's it.
that's what it is. It's and it is. It's pure science because it's mostly different types of chemical reactions that have to go on in a controlled environment. And especially anybody knows if they've ever tried to make a souffle and you screw up a little bit on the heat or whatever, and yeah, it just
Yeah.
is what it is. Um, but no,
Now,
I think it was being able to hang around my grandmother was part of
it
it,
was
but I
really the
think it was
draw.
also the things that she would make. And she, like I said, I failed miserably as a pastry assistant. She used to try and she'd do a lot of wedding cakes and things, and she'd make these little icing roses, and honest to God, she could make an icing rose in like 2 seconds and it would look like a rose. And I would try and make this thing, and it looked like a big glob of goo. And and she was not a small woman either, and she had big hands, and I'm just like, how in the world do you do that? Where's the dexterity? And anyway, probably came from making 100,000 icing
Yeah.
roses for cakes. But
She
anyway,
put in her 10,000 hours somewhere.
she put in her 10,000 hours. That's right. But
Now,
anyway, I
did she ever
just,
tell you why
what,
she loved that side of it, the scientific side? Was her mind, did her mind work that way? That
I
precision,
don't know. She
the
never really did
detail.
say. I think she just part was she really liked sweets. So I think that was probably a big part of it. But but yeah, and so eventually I think she sort of realized that pastry was probably not in my future, and then she pushed me towards the savory side and gave me Julia Child's uh, cookbooks and Sabatier chef's knife, um, and it was like, here,
What was that like,
you need to make
David?
all of these.
Yeah. Well, let's pause there for a second. What was that like getting your first knife? I imagine that's for a chef, that's like it. That's like the start of it all, right?
It is.
That's the
Yeah.
mile, the pinnacle, or that's I don't know. How would you describe that feeling? Did you feel more important? Did you feel holding that knife and receiving that knife? And in a way, she was your grandmother, Mimi, she was saying that she trusted you with that she
Right.
blessed you, that she knew you could do that, follow that career. Right.
Yeah.
That was almost like a an acceptance into that
It
work.
was. It was. Yeah. No, and it was great. What you know, young boy doesn't want to have, a nice big knife, right? So, um, yeah, it was an interesting time. I was growing up in Oklahoma. Uh, there wasn't, Whole Foods down the road, that
Yeah.
you could go to and get ingredients. And but we lived in a town that uh, used to be Conoco's original headquarters, and so there was a lot of expats that would come in and out, um, and I'm a fourth generation Conocoan, so lots of family members and people that knew people, and so actually would found a way to kind of create a network of people that were Conoco had an office in London, and so people were going back and forth all the time, and it was like, hey, by any chance, could you pick up, X, Y, and Z for me? I can't get it here. And so I had, all kinds of ingredients and things smuggled back from UK and other places. And anyway, it was
You
an
had your own
interesting
little
time.
trading depot going on,
My own little,
huh?
yeah.
Little
And
mercantile. Did your
Yeah. So
grandmother own a bakery, or did she do this for a living? It sounds like, or was it just
my
for
mother had
fun?
a restaurant. She had a restaurant,
Your
but
mother did.
my mother did, and my
Okay.
grandmother had a gourmet store. So think about like a Williams Sonoma today. That's
Okay.
what she had. And
Or were they up? Were they next to each other, or were they in town?
no, down the street from
But
each
it
other.
was in a way connected through the family, and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And so yeah, when I would go down to my mother's restaurant, you know, again as a little kid, there's all this big equipment and sounds and activity and things like that, and it was like, hey, that's pretty cool.
Well,
Uh,
speaking of cool, David, I think you're probably going to lead into this here. So in high school, you had your own restaurant. You opened your own restaurant,
yes,
10 seats.
yeah,
How did that come about?
that's about right.
Describe
Well,
the restaurant. What was it called?
it was called La Vie en Rose, after the Edith Piaf song. And like I said, I had my grandmother give me Julia Child's cookbook, and so I was all into everything French, and anyway, fell in love with Edith Piaf, and thought, I'm just going to I'll just name my little restaurant after her, and um, and it kind of came about because I was just talking to my grandmother one day, and I said, one of these days I'd like to have my own restaurant. And she was like, "Well, what's stopping you from having one now?" And I'm like, "Well, let's see, like a place to have it and things like that." And
Plate, silverware.
yeah, and she's like, "Well, we have space in the back of the store. There was a mezzanine level, and there was some space kind of in the very back, kind of like a storage area." And she's like, "We could just convert all that, and you could put a restaurant in back there." And I was like, "Wow, okay, well let's do that."
I
So
love Grandma Mimi.
yeah, yeah. I
Supportive.
mean, she was just like, why are you waiting? Just do it now
Well,
if you really want to do it. And I was like, okay. So my grandfather and I built out the space, and my grandmother decorated it. And, next thing I know, I've got a French restaurant and 16 years old, and, just work it basically after school and on the weekends. And um,
how often was it? Was it open every night or
we were open like 4 or 5 nights a week.
okay.
Yeah, like Wednesday through Saturday. Yeah.
And French cuisine.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned this, and I do want to point this out and highlight it a little bit that you cooked every recipe out of that book. It took you 2 years. You were like the
Yeah,
original Cooking with Julia movie.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I wish I had
Did you
written
feel
the
like
book
they
and
ripped off your story when you
yeah,
saw that?
written the book and done the movie. Yeah, it was a little bit of a different background, but yeah, kind of the same thing. So
That's so cool. I wonder how many people have done that. Was that a thing, or was it just
I,
you said why did
I
you
don't
decide
know.
to do it? Did you say I'm just gonna do, did you start from the front and go to the back and work your way?
Pretty much. There were a few things we skipped over and then went back to do them. And a lot of it came down to just, ingredients. Like I said, growing up in a little town in Oklahoma,
Yeah.
wasn't the easiest to get some of the ingredients. But um yeah,
Well,
it
you
was I mean, it was one of those things. She was just like, well, this is a this is a good start for you in terms of savory side of things.
yeah.
And we used to do Sunday dinner every Sunday. It'd be my parents and myself, my sister, my grandmother, and it was usually Sunday roast or chicken or whatever. And my grandmother was just like, why don't you just make, you know, things every Sunday? I don't have to cook Sunday dinner now.
Yeah.
It's on you, but this is a way that then we can all enjoy it, because you can't really make a recipe for one or two people, right? Most of her recipes were four or six. And so, um, you know, just kind of made sense. And I made them eat aspic and all the other all the other
Oh,
things, and people are just like,
would you tell them first or would you let them eat
a
it and then
lot.
see what they
Well, at times I used to tell them, and then it got to where it was like, I'm just gonna leave it up to your
see if they
imagination.
like it first and then
Yeah,
let them know?
see if you like it.
Oh, no,
And
you know what you're eating now?
exactly.
So we got to take a break, but before we go, you're a Choctaw native.
Yes.
Was Grandma Mimi a Choctaw native as well?
She had Cherokee. It was on my dad's side.
Okay.
So
Uh,
other side. That was
but
the
did
chalk.
when you were in the kitchen with her, as you grew up, did you or did you become aware of like right now with your restaurant now, ISHTIA, you I guess I should say focus, or you really bring out the heritage and the
Yes.
ingredients and pay homage to them and respect.
That's the whole focus of the restaurant. Yeah.
Yeah. Did that come in at all? I know you had a garden, right, with your grandmother. You guys
Oh yeah.
together
Yeah, and
and
and that
did
was really just kind of the norm back then.
yeah.
You know, we would spend the whole summer, raising things and canning them, and then in the winter, when we wanted a can of green beans or whatever, it wasn't go to the store and get something. It was go down the root cellar and, pull a jar of green beans off the shelf.
Yeah.
So
The way it should be, really.
the way
So,
it should be. Yeah.
yeah. Do you think ISHTIA was born at all in your conscious mind or subconscious? The eventual leading you eventually to the path of paying respect to your heritage
Yeah,
and
I think
ingredients?
so. It's kind of one of those things that um, what most people don't realize is that 60% of the world's cuisine owes their heritage to Native Americans from North and South America.
Hmm.
Um,
What's the percentage from South America? I just read this or I heard this. It's like a
it's
major
yeah, it's
60.
I mean 60% between sort of North and South America.
I think you told me
Um,
that.
It might have been. You can look it up, but I always tell people because we get a lot of people and they'll call the restaurant and they're like, "Well, I want to make a reservation, but I'm not really sure what the food is or what it's going to be like." And I'm like, "Well, do you like Italian food?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, we love Italian food." I'm like, "Then you're going to like this." "Do you like Mexican food?" "Oh, we love Mexican." "Well, you're going to like this." It's like, why? Well, because all the ingredients are what you're already familiar with, right? So tomatoes, onions, peppers, chilies, all those things that go into Italian food that you would think of as, you know, Italian, right? Came from here. Um, you think about beans and corn and squash and all the different flavors of Mexican cooking that all came from here, right? So um, the thing that is uh, you know strange, I guess, I don't know what a better word would be, is that in the entire US, there's maybe a dozen Native American restaurants. That's it. Um,
Really?
and when you think about where all of the flavors came from and honestly, if it wasn't for Native Americans helping out the pilgrims when they landed, you know, there wouldn't have been really a colonization. There wouldn't have been those things. And we have another restaurant called The Preserve, which I did with Chef Binchuan Painter and her husband Graham that have a restaurant called Street to Kitchen, and we call her Chef G, and she won the Best Chef award from James Beard last year. And anyway, we created this restaurant called The Preserve, which is Thai and Native American restaurant. And when we first opened that, everybody was scratching their head going, how do you do a fusion of Thai and Native American? And we're like, there is no fusion. There are two menus that are interwoven And we tell the story basically of ingredients and colonization and how ingredients move from one continent to another. Everybody thinks Thai food is this hot, spicy, flavor profile. And the Thais hated spice and hated chilies until about 400 years ago. And all of that came from the Portuguese and the spice trade. So if you go back 500, 600, 1,000 years, Thai food and Choctaw food was very similar, almost the same. A little bit of different ingredients, but that was really about it. Cooking techniques were the same, presentation, how it was served, all those things were very much the same. And so what we're able to do with that restaurant is give an understanding to people about how those ingredients moved, from continent to continent, how it changed the world. And it wasn't all one way. It wasn't like, well, everything came from North and South America. The things that came back towards us were things like black pepper. That came from the other side of the world. Chicken. Uh, Chicken is our chicken that we eat today is a product of the red jungle fowl from Thailand and the gray jungle fowl from China. Those two were bred, and that's basically what makes up chicken today. And so, when you spend some time and think about where all these ingredients came from and what they turned into. And another good example is one of the most famous Choctaw dishes is called Tanchi Labona. If you're from Mexican heritage, you would recognize it as pozole. I get people in from all kinds of different cultures, and they're like, "Oh my God, this tastes like my grandmother." What she used to make, but we would do this little thing differently, right? And I'm like, exactly, Um, a lot of these cultures, what people kind of find out is there's more to us that is the same than is different, right? And I
Mhm.
think food's a great way to bring people together rather than divide them.
Yeah,
If I make a tanchi labona, which is basically a nixtamalized corn and pork soup, um, and somebody's like, wow, this reminds me of my grandmother's pozole. It's like, well, that's fantastic, right? But now you can see that my heritage and your heritage are basically the same. And when you start looking at food and ingredients and where it came from and how transformative it was, um, both pre-colonization and post-colonization, it's really, I think, quite amazing. And if people would step back a bit, and start to look at, uh, kind of how, uh, you know, food has played a role in their lives, I think we kind of all be happier.
that's
Food
what we
makes
would.
me happy.
That's why I read that that opening from Eater because it just struck me that all those things are true and that dining out hasn't been as fun. For me, it was
Yeah,
always family or friends, and we gathered and we talked and we did it a few
right.
times a week. And you find things that you love together, you share together, and places that you love to go and share. So I thought that was very fitting for an opening for you and for what you have accomplished and what you're accomplishing with your restaurant, ISHTIA. So one of the things that I really like, David, we do have to take a break right now because I've gone way over my time here, as I usually do.
Okay.
That's all right. It's been very interesting. One of the things that I liked, and I think it was on it wasn't, I don't believe it's on ISHTIA's website, but but correct me if I'm wrong. I was just searching for it. There's a timeline. I believe it was on your previous
It's on the
restaurant.
preserve, the
Oh, it's
preserve.
on the preserve. Okay.
Yeah.
So the thprsrv.com. Check the timeline out. It's very interesting. I do want to get back to that in our final segment and come back to that timeline. But I really had a lot of fun going through the different the timeline of food history, basically, and in relation to South America and North America. And I think you'd find it fascinating. So I'd check that out. Definitely go check that out. Again, it's on thepreserve.com, THPRSRV.com. And there's a reason that the preserve is short in that way. Do you want to explain that?
Yeah,
I,
so when we had decided on the name of the restaurant, and then of course, how do you get a URL that makes sense? And and so we had this idea, the Thai language doesn't really have vowels, and we thought also from a Native American standpoint, if we did sort of a pre-colonial view of it, and got rid of the vowels that way, maybe it would make sense. And so we took all the vowels out, and all of a sudden we're like, wow, that's like the perfect name. And guess what? The .com is available. Um, so that's kind of how we ended up with the preserve spelled that way.
and I want to talk more about the preserve coming up here after the break. We'll explain what you guys do there. It's pretty amazing. Thepreserve.com again. You can go to ISHTIA. I'll spell that as well. ISHTIA.com to make a reservation. They're on Facebook and Instagram at ISHTIA HTX for Houston, Texas. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere with Chef David Skinner of ISHTIA, just named by Eater the very best restaurant in America. We'll be right back.